Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever had a day where the entire world feels like it's moving at 100 miles per hour, but you're stuck in a single moment from the past? Today, we're following the story of Marcus. It's been exactly 1 year since he lost someone he loved. On the outside, he looks like a professional employee, answering emails, attending meetings, and drinking coffee. But on the inside, he is fighting a storm of memories. In this story, we're going to look at how we navigate normal life when our hearts are heavy. We'll also learn essential English vocabulary for describing emotions, professional boundaries, and resilience. The alarm clock on the nightstand vibrates with a sharp, rhythmic buzz. It is exactly 6:30 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning. Marcus reaches out a heavy arm, his fingers fumbling in the dark to silence the noise. As the screen lights up, the date stares back at him in bold digital numbers. March 12th. The date hits him like a physical blow to the chest, knocking the air out of his lungs. It has been exactly 365 days since the world changed forever. He lies perfectly still, watching the dust motes dance in a stray beam of morning light. The room looks identical to how it did a year ago. The same half-read book sits on the chair. The same shadows stretch across the wooden floor. Yet the silence in the house feels different now. It is heavy, thick, and suffocating. He remembers the frantic phone calls, the sterile smell of the hospital, and the way the clock seemed to stop. But today, the clock is ticking quite loudly, indifferent to his grief. Marcus stares at the ceiling, wondering how the birds can sing so loudly outside his window. He feels a strange sense of resentment toward the sun for rising so predictably. How does the rest of the world have the audacity to keep spinning when his life stopped a year ago? To his neighbors, this is just another workday, a day for meetings and grocery lists. To Marcus, it is a minefield of memories that he must navigate until sunset. He feels incredibly fragile, as if his skin is made of thin glass that might shatter at any moment. The thought of putting on a suit and sitting in a cubicle feels like an impossible task. He imagines his coworkers laughing in the breakroom, oblivious to the milestone he is carrying. Part of him wants to stay under the covers and let the day disappear into the shadows. But another part, the part that has survived this long, knows he has to move. He takes a long, shaky breath and closes his eyes for one more second. He whispers a name into the empty room, a soft sound that vanishes into the air. Slowly, Marcus pushes back the blankets and places his feet on the cold floor. The first battle of the anniversary has begun. He stands up, braces his shoulders, and prepares to face the ghost of the past year. Marcus stands before the bathroom mirror, the steam from the shower slowly clearing. The fluorescent light overhead flickers, casting harsh shadows across his tired face. He stares at his reflection, searching for the man he used to be before last March. His eyes look heavier today, circled by the dark rings of a restless night. He reaches for his razor, his hand trembling slightly as he applies the cool shaving cream. The repetitive motion of the blade against his skin is a small mechanical comfort. Each stroke feels like he is scraping away a layer of his grief to reveal a worker. He splashes cold water on his face, the sudden chill shocking his system into focus. Now comes the most difficult part of the morning, the construction of the mask. Marcus practices a smile in the mirror, but it doesn't reach his eyes. It looks jagged and forced.
He resets his expression, smoothing out the lines of sorrow until his face is a blank slate. This is the version of Marcus that his boss and his clients expect to see at 9 a.m. He buttons his crisp white shirt, the fabric feeling like a suit of armor against the world. As he tightens his silk tie, he feels the familiar constriction around his throat. It isn't just the tie, it is the weight of the words he knows he cannot say today. He can't tell his manager that his heart is breaking in the middle of a budget review. He can't explain to the intern why he stared at a blank screen for 10 minutes. In the professional world, there is no room for the messy, jagged edges of a grief anniversary. Marcus leans closer to the glass, checking for any cracks in his composure. He whispers to his reflection, "You just have to make it through the next 8 hours." The mask is set, polished, professional, and entirely hollow. He picks up his briefcase, the leather handle worn and familiar in his grip. He takes one last look at the empty hallway behind him before turning off the light. The bathroom falls into darkness, but Marcus is already walking toward the door. He steps out into the hallway, his shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Each step is a conscious effort to move away from the memory and toward the office. He opens the front door, the hinges creaking in a way that sounds like a sigh. The mask is on, the armor is buckled, and Marcus is ready to pretend.
The heavy iron door of the apartment building swings shut behind him with a metallic thud. Marcus walks toward the subway station, his breath turning into small clouds of mist in the air. The morning rush is in full swing, and the pavement is crowded with people in a hurry. Everyone is moving with a sense of purpose, clutching coffee cups and checking watches. He feels like a ghost walking through a crowd of living people. At the station entrance, he's swept into the flow of commuters descending the stairs. The air underground is warm and smells of electricity and damp concrete. He swipes his transit card and moves onto the platform just as the train screeches to a halt. The doors slide open and a wave of people pushes him into the crowded car. Marcus finds a small corner near the door and grips the cold metal pole. He's surrounded by strangers, their shoulders pressing against his from every side. To his left, a teenager is playing a loud game on a phone. To his right, a man is reading the news. Every person here is carrying a story, but today, Marcus feels like his story is too heavy to hold. He pulls out his headphones and slides them over his ears, seeking a moment of privacy. He doesn't play any music, he just wants the silence to dampen the noise of the city. The train jolts forward, and the tunnel lights flicker past the windows like strobe lights. Each flash of light feels like a heartbeat, counting down the minutes until he reaches the office. A woman standing nearby is holding a bouquet of lilies, their scent filling the cramped space. The smell is sudden and sharp, instantly transporting Marcus back to the funeral service. For a terrifying second, his vision blurs and the sounds of the train seem to fade away. He grips the metal pole so hard his knuckles turn white, forcing himself to stay in the present. Focus on the floor, he tells himself. Focus on the rhythm of the wheels. He counts the stops in his head, a silent mantra to keep the panic at bay. The train slows, the brakes let out a high-pitched squeal, and the doors slide open. He exhales a breath he didn't realize he was holding as he steps back onto the platform. The fresh air at the top of the stairs feels like a gift, though his heart is still racing. He is only 3 blocks away from his building now, the glass towers gleaming in the sun. He adjusts his coat, straightens his shoulders, and prepares for the final walk to the lobby.
The commute is over, but the hardest part of the day is standing right in front of him.
The revolving glass doors of the office building sweep Marcus into the polished lobby. The air conditioning is crisp, and the scent of expensive floor wax fills the air. He walks toward the elevators, his reflection ghosting across the marble walls. At the security desk, the receptionist, a cheerful woman named Elena, looks up and beams. "Good morning, Marcus. You're in early today," she says, her voice echoing in the hall. Marcus feels a momentary jolt of panic, like a deer caught in a pair of headlights. "Good morning, Elena," he replies, his voice sounding thin and unfamiliar to his own ears. Then comes the question he has been dreading since he woke up. "How are you doing today?" she asks, her eyes bright with genuine, casual interest. It is a simple, everyday phrase, a verbal handshake used millions of times a day. But today, the question feels like a heavy weight being dropped onto a fragile scale. Marcus stops for a microsecond, the silence stretching out just a heartbeat too long. A dozen honest answers flash through his mind like a deck of cards being shuffled. I am drowning. I am exhausted. I am remembering the exact moment I said goodbye. But he knows that the lobby of a corporate office is no place for the truth. He swallows the lump in his throat and forces a small, tight smile onto his face. "I'm doing well, thanks. Just a busy morning ahead," he says, the lie smooth and practiced. Elena nods, satisfied with the response, and turns back to her computer screen. "That's the spirit. Have a productive one," she calls out as he moves toward the elevator. Marcus steps into the metal car and watches the doors slide shut, sealing him in. He leans his head against the cool back wall and exhales a long, shaky breath. The interaction was only 10 seconds long, but it felt like running a marathon. He realized that the "how are you" trap is the most dangerous part of his day. It forces him to choose between being a liar or being a burden to people's comfort. As the elevator climbs toward the 12th floor, he feels the pressure in his chest tighten. The normal world requires a normal answer, no matter how much it hurts to give it. The bell dings, the doors open, and he is greeted by the hum of printers and ringing phones. He steps out into the open-plan office, his mask firmly back in place for the next round. He has survived the first trap, but the day is only just beginning. Marcus reaches his desk and sets his briefcase down with a dull, heavy thud. The blue light of the computer monitor flickers to life, illuminating the desk on his keyboard. His inbox is already filling up with urgent requests, red flags, and mundane office chatter. To anyone else, the mountain of work would be a source of stress or frustration. To Marcus, it looks like a life raft in the middle of a dark, turbulent ocean. He opens a massive Excel file, a complex grid of thousands of rows and columns. He focuses on the cold, hard logic of the formulas, the way A must always lead to B. In this digital world, everything balances, and every error has a clear, fixable solution. He begins to input data, his fingers moving with a frantic, rhythmic speed. The clicking of the keys becomes a drumbeat that drowns out the noise of his thoughts. For a few minutes, he isn't a man mourning a loss. He is a processor of information. He loses himself in the columns of figures, the percentages, and the growth charts. If he keeps his eyes fixed on the screen, he doesn't have to see the empty space beside him. If he keeps his mind on the budget, he doesn't have to think about the hospital bills from a year ago. The spreadsheets are a sanctuary where feelings are replaced by functions and logic. A notification pops up in the corner of his screen, a team lunch invite. The sight of the date on the invite causes his hand to freeze mid-air over the mouse. Suddenly, the numbers on the screen begin to blur, turning into meaningless gray shapes.
The silence of his sanctuary is broken by the sound of a coworker laughing in the next cubicle. The sound is sharp and bright, piercing through the wall of concentration he has built. He stares at a cell on the spreadsheet, his mind suddenly unable to remember what a sum is. He realizes that no matter how deep he digs into the work, the grief is still waiting for him. He takes a deep breath, forcing himself to count to 10 as his heart begins to race. The sanctuary is starting to feel like a cage, the glowing screen making his eyes ache. He closes his eyes for a moment, trying to reclaim the focus that was keeping him afloat. He clicks back into the cell, deletes a mistake, and forces his fingers to start moving again. "Work," he whispers under his breath, a command to his brain to stay in the present. He buries himself back into the data, hoping the numbers will protect him for a few more hours. But the spreadsheet feels thinner now, a paper-thin shield against a very real storm.
The clock on the wall crawls toward noon, and Marcus realizes he can no longer hide behind his monitor. The office begins to empty as people head out in groups, their voices echoing in the hallway. He feels a knot of anxiety in his stomach at the thought of sitting in a crowded restaurant. He decides to stay in, heading toward the small break room at the end of the corridor. He carries a brown paper bag containing a sandwich he prepared without any real appetite. Inside the break room, the air is thick with the smell of burnt coffee and reheated pasta. 3 of his colleagues are gathered around the central table, laughing at a video on a phone. Marcus tries to slip toward the corner table unnoticed, hoping to be a silent observer. "Hey, Marcus, come sit with us," calls out Greg, a project manager with a booming voice. The invitation is kind, but to Marcus it feels like an obligation he isn't ready to fulfill. He sits at the edge of the group, unwrapping his sandwich with slow, deliberate movements. The conversation around him is a blur of weekend plans, sports scores, and office gossip. They're debating the finale of a popular TV show, their voices rising with excitement. Marcus nods when they look at him, offering a small "yeah" or "I see" to stay part of the flow. But he feels like he is watching a movie in a language he no longer speaks fluently. Their normal problems, a slow internet connection, a late delivery, seem so light and trivial. He wonders if they would stop talking if they knew what today was for him. He wonders if the air in the room would become heavy and awkward if he spoke the truth. The bright fluorescent lights of the break room feel too aggressive, making his head throb. Someone spills a bit of coffee, and the group erupts into a chorus of playful groans and jokes. Marcus stares at his sandwich, realizing he hasn't taken a single bite of the dry bread. He feels a sudden, sharp wave of loneliness, even though he's surrounded by people. This is the isolation of grief, being in a room full of life, but feeling completely detached. He looks at the clock, counting down the seconds until he can reasonably excuse himself. "I actually have a lot of emails to catch up on," he says, standing up before he's finished. "Already? You barely ate, man," Greg says, looking at Marcus's nearly full lunch bag. "Just one of those days," Marcus replies, the phrase acting as his ultimate shield. He walks out of the break room, his heart beating a little faster as the door swings shut. He returns to the quiet of his desk, preferring the cold glow of the screen to the warmth of the crowd. At 2 p.m., a calendar notification pings on Marcus's screen like a warning bell. Quarterly Strategy Review, Conference Room B. Marcus stands up, his legs feeling heavy as if he's walking through deep water. He gathers his notebook and a pen, checking his tie one last time in the reflection of his monitor. The conference room is filled with the low hum of voices and the rustle of paper. Large glass windows overlook the city, but Marcus keeps his eyes fixed on the mahogany table. His manager, Sarah, stands at the front of the room, clicking through a colorful slide deck. She's talking about future growth, long-term goals, and the roadmap for next year. The word future rings in Marcus's ears, sounding strange and hollow. A year ago today, his vision of the future was shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Now, listening to talk of 5-year plans feels like listening to a fairy tale. Suddenly, Sarah's voice cuts through his thoughts. "Marcus, what are your thoughts on the Q3 projections?" The room goes silent, and a dozen pairs of eyes turn toward him, waiting for an answer. Marcus opens his mouth, but for a terrifying second, no sound comes out. A memory flashes vividly in his mind, the way the afternoon sun looked in a hospital waiting room. He can almost hear the rhythmic, steady beep of a heart monitor over the hum of the air conditioning. The shadows in the corner of the conference room seem to stretch and darken. He feels the mask slipping, the cold sweat beginning to form at the back of his neck. "Marcus?" Sarah asks again, her brow furrowing with a hint of concern. He clears his throat, the sound loud in the quiet room, and takes a slow sip of water. He forces his mind to leave the hospital room and return to the spreadsheet he studied earlier. "Based on the current data," he begins, his voice steady but low, "I think we need to adjust the margin." He speaks for 2 minutes, using professional jargon to bridge the gap over his internal abyss. He watches as people nod and take notes, satisfied with his logical, calculated response. Inside, he's shaking, but outside, he looks like the picture of corporate reliability. The meeting continues, the conversation moving on to budgets and logistics. Marcus sinks back into his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He has successfully performed his role, but the effort has left him feeling utterly drained. He stares at the shadows on the wall, realizing that the hardest battles are the ones no one sees. Marcus returns to his desk, feeling as though he has just finished a long, grueling race. The adrenaline from the meeting has faded, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. He stares at his computer screen, but the lines of code and text have become a blurry mess. He leans his head into his hands, closing his eyes just to escape the glare of the office lights. The office is quiet now, the only sounds being the soft clicking of mice and distant muffled talk. Suddenly, he hears a soft clink on the wooden surface of his desk, right next to his elbow. He startles slightly and looks up to see Sarah, his manager, standing there. She isn't holding a clipboard or a list of tasks. She is looking at him with a soft, steady expression. On his desk lies a high-quality bar of dark chocolate and a small handwritten sticky note. The note doesn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss," or "I know why you are struggling today." It simply says, "You've been working very hard, Marcus. Please take 15 minutes for yourself." She doesn't wait for a thank you, nor does she try to force a deep conversation. She just gives him a small, knowing nod and walks back toward her private office. Marcus stares at the chocolate bar, a lump forming in his throat that he cannot swallow. He realizes that she remembers, or at least she senses the weight he's carrying. That small, unspoken acknowledgement is the first moment of genuine human warmth he has felt all day. It is a kindness that doesn't require him to explain himself or defend his mask. He picks up the chocolate, the gold foil crinkling softly in his trembling fingers. For the first time since 6:30 a.m., the tight band around his chest feels a little bit looser. He doesn't have to be a perfect machine. He is allowed to be a person who is hurting. He decides to follow her advice and steps away from the glowing screens and the ringing phones. He walks to the large window at the end of the hall and looks out at the city below. The cars look like tiny toys, and the people look like ants moving through a giant maze. He takes a bite of the chocolate, the sweetness a sharp contrast to the bitterness of the day.
He realizes that surviving a day like this isn't just about acting normal or being productive. It is about accepting the small hands reached out in the dark to help you keep standing. He stays by the window for exactly 15 minutes, watching the clouds move across the sky. When he returns to his desk, the spreadsheets are still there, but they seem less intimidating. He keeps the small yellow sticky note tucked under the corner of his keyboard.
The office clock finally ticks past 4 p.m., signaling the beginning of the end of the workday. Outside, the bright afternoon sun begins its slow descent, painting the glass towers in shades of amber. Marcus can feel his energy levels hitting a critical low, his professional mask beginning to feel heavy. The mental effort of maintaining a neutral expression for 9 hours has left him physically sore. Every email he types now takes twice as long, his brain struggling to form simple sentences. He watches his coworkers begin to pack their bags, their movements light and full of evening plans. "See you tomorrow, Marcus," someone calls out, their voice echoing cheerfully through the cubicles. He raises a hand in a silent wave, not trusting his voice to remain steady if he speaks. The office grows quieter as the overhead lights in the far sections begin to automatically dim. The humming of the large printer finally stops, leaving a silence that feels both peaceful and haunting. Marcus stares at the final task on his to-do list, a simple report that feels like a mountain. He forces himself to click through the final tabs, his eyes burning from the hours of artificial light. He thinks about how he dreaded this specific hour for the last 365 days. He had expected to collapse, to make a scene, or to simply be unable to get out of bed. Yet here he is, sitting in his chair, having fulfilled every one of his professional obligations. He realized that he didn't overcome his grief today. He simply carried it with him while he worked. The final hour is less about the work and more about the strange realization of survival. He hits send on the final email and feels a phantom weight lift off his shoulders. He logs off his computer, the screen turning black and reflecting his tired but calm face. He reaches for his coat, the fabric cool against his skin, and slowly slides his arms into the sleeves. The office is almost empty now, just the janitorial staff beginning their rounds in the distance. He takes the small yellow sticky note from Sarah and tucks it safely into his wallet. It is a souvenir of a day he never wants to repeat, but one he is proud to have finished. He takes one last look at his desk, ensuring everything is in its proper, orderly place. The order on his desk is a small victory against the chaos he feels inside his heart. He walks toward the elevators, his footsteps sounding hollow on the carpeted floor. He presses the down button and waits, the silence of the building wrapping around him like a blanket. The workday is officially over, and the normal world has no more claims on his time today. He is tired, he is sad, but he is still here, and that is more than he hoped for this morning.
The cool evening air hits Marcus's face as he steps out of the office building. The city is transitioning from the frantic energy of work to the softer pulse of the night. Streetlights flicker to life, casting long amber glows onto the damp pavement. Marcus doesn't head straight for the subway. He decides to walk the long way home. The mask is finally off, his facial muscles relaxing into a natural, weary expression. He no longer has to pretend to be good or busy or fine. He walks past a flower shop, the scent of roses and wet earth momentarily stopping him in his tracks. Instead of turning away from the memory, he allows himself to breathe in the fragrance deeply.
He finds a small park bench overlooking the river and sits down, resting his elbows on his knees. The water is dark and shimmering, reflecting the neon signs of the city across the bank. For the first time all day, a single hot tear escapes and tracks slowly down his cheek. It isn't a tear of fresh agony, but one of profound, quiet release. He has carried the weight of a year's worth of normalcy on his back for 12 hours. He thinks about the alarm clock this morning and how impossible this moment felt then. The world is still spinning, and the birds will sing again tomorrow, just as they did today. But Marcus realizes that his world hasn't stopped, it has simply changed shape. He isn't over it, and he knows he never truly will be. Grief is not a mountain to climb and leave behind. It is a landscape he is learning to live in, one day, one meeting, and one walk at a time. He reaches into his pocket and feels the crinkle of the chocolate wrapper and the sticky note. These are small proofs that he is not alone in his silence, even when he feels he is. He stands up, the stiffness in his joints a reminder of the physical toll of the day. The walk back to his apartment is quiet, his footsteps echoing against the brick walls of the alleyways. When he reaches his front door, he pauses for a moment before turning the key in the lock. The house is still quiet, but it no longer feels quite as suffocating as it did at 6:30 a.m. He sets his keys on the table, hangs up his coat, and looks at the date on his phone one last time. The anniversary is almost over, and tomorrow will be day 366. He has survived the quietest storm of his life, and for tonight, that is enough. He turns off the light and heads toward the bedroom, walking through the shadows instead of hiding from them.
Marcus made it through the day. He didn't have to be perfect. He just had to be present. Grief doesn't have a schedule, and it certainly doesn't respect office hours. If you are navigating a difficult anniversary today, remember that small acts of kindness, both to others and to yourself, make all the difference. But before you go, it's time to test what you've learned. I've prepared a vocabulary and idioms quiz based on Marcus's story. You can find it in the pinned comment below or over on our Community tab. It's the best way to make sure these new expressions really stick. Today, we focused on words like sanctuary, trivial, and endure. Try to use one of them in the comments, and don't forget to check your answers on the quiz. If you found this story helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to Glisso. We believe that learning a language is about sharing the human experience. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.